Cool. So, yep, we're going to, as I said, just wait another minute for everyone else to join. If you're feeling camera ready, feel free to turn your cameras on. It's a little helpful for me just to be able to see kind of where you are along the way and if I need to slow down. But if you don't feel camera ready, no worries. We can just kind of communicate about it. Um, if you want to, if it's quiet where you are, you can unmute and chat, um, or feel free to also just use the chat feature, and we can go from there. Um, so the coffee tasting that we're doing is coffees that actually, let me bring up the roast dates. I apologize, I didn't have that ready right away. Let's see. So yes, your roast dates would be December 4th, basically anything past December 4th. Roast date on your bag would be the coffees that we'll be tasting. Um, do either of you have earlier coffees that were roasted before December 4th?
Nope, mine are December 11th, so should be
Oh,
good.
wonderful. Awesome. Awesome. If so, the way that the way that Driftaway works is, if we roast five coffees at a time, change them up every month. They're from different countries every month, but they'll always fall into, these set flavor profiles. So if Gwendolyn, if you happen to have older coffees, they're gonna taste very similar to each other, and then just the reveal at the end will just be different. But yeah, let's get going since it looks like it's going to be a nice kind of chill group, just the four of us together. I'm going to share this screen again just to make sure y'all have everything you need to get going. If you received whole bean coffee, you want to have ground it, and from the information that you would have already received or seen online, it's 12 grams weighed on a scale, or 2 tablespoons, yellow, blue, red, green, purple. You've got the 5 mugs that can hold at least 7.5 ounces. And so you want to just set your mugs up and put your bags in front of them. Once you've got the ground coffee in each mug that coordinates with the bag color, you can just flip over the bags if you want. There's not really that much information on them, so you can keep them face up as well. But in any case, your Explorer box, that first shipment, came with this tasting form that we'll use. The back of the brochure has a coffee flavor wheel. We will also be using that. You'll need an additional 2 mugs. They can be any size. 2 spoons, like soup spoons, work a little better. Teaspoons also work. Something to write with. And now here's what I'm going to ask. Do you have a gram scale, a kitchen scale, or are you going to use a tablespoon and measuring pitcher?
I have a kitchen scale.
Okay, Mark's got a kitchen scale, and Gwendolyn, just let me know if whatever you have. But basically,
The kitchen scale.
you have a kitchen scale. Wonderful. Okay, cool. So that means that the way that we'll time our water will be the same, so that we are going to be the same temp. Great. Wonderful. Because if you had a measuring pitcher, and since we are recording this for posterity, your water, you're going to want it right off the boil rather than cooled for a few minutes, because you're going to lose some temperature pouring from the kettle into the measuring pitcher, from the measuring pitcher into the cup. So yeah. But since we're using scales, we are going to use the coffee a few minutes off a boil. So cool. Well, again, welcome to your coffee tasting. We're going to be together for the hour. This is a professional style, side by side comparative coffee tasting. And the way that we do this, right, we don't need a coffee maker or a filter. And we actually start by smelling the dry coffee grounds rather than starting by pouring hot water over it. So When I'm done explaining a couple things, that's when we'll start. We'll start by smelling the dry grounds. We'll then pour hot water and let the coffee steep. They need to steep at least 4 minutes. It can go over that, and that's okay. Once the coffee's cooled down enough, we'll taste them. And the whole goal for me, or my goal for you, is for you to learn more about your coffee preferences, be able to pick out one or two or three, whichever ones that are your preference, and also learn a little bit more about coffee as we go. We can share with each other what we're tasting, what our preferences are, our favorites, our least favorites. The very end is the big reveal, and that's when you get to open up the envelope that came in your Explorer box and look at the postcards inside, and that will reveal where the coffees are from. And we'll do that together. So if you would, go ahead and check out your Driftaway flavor wheel that you can see on the back of your brochure, as well as your tasting form. So yes, there we go. So, okay. Have any, by the way, have either of y'all ever done a coffee tasting before like this, like side by side?
No.
No, this is
Awesome.
my
Okay.
first one.
Have you done like a wine tasting or a beer, chocolate, anything like that?
I have done a wine tasting one before.
Usually that answer is yes. Yeah. Usually the answer is no, that you haven't done a coffee tasting, because that's much more rare. So what the wine tasting would work very, very similarly, right, to a coffee tasting, where we want to make more than one coffee at once so that we have a basis of comparison, right? The easiest way to figure out how a coffee tastes or smells is to smell or taste it next to another one. Well, essentially what we'll be doing is just asking ourselves, what does this coffee remind me of? Whether that's the smell or the taste, what does it remind me of, right? They're going to be generalities. They're from 5 places in the world, and they're all different roast levels from light to darks, right? So there's some generalities that we can make about the coffees, how they smell and taste. Darker roast coffee tends to be heavier, more smoky, maybe bitter. Lighter roast coffee tends to be, well, lighter, maybe more mild, maybe sour, fruity, tart. But in any case, as we get more specific, that's when it really gets subjective, and it's really based on what you've experienced in your life, right? If I've never had chocolate, it'd be hard to describe a coffee as tasting or smelling like chocolate. So essentially, trust your gut. Jot down the first thing that comes into your head on this tasting form, especially, fragrance, aroma, and flavor, those first 2 columns. If nothing comes into your head, which is also pretty common when you first start trying to do this, that's what that flavor wheel is here for. So it starts out more general, right? Does this coffee smell or taste more fruity? Does it smell or taste more roasty? Those are kind of the 2 extremes. As you go towards the center, you can see it gets more specific. You can choose one of those words, or again, you can use your own words. There's a column for each coffee designated by a color and a number. There's a space for you to guess where the coffee's from. That's a very hard thing to do, even for a coffee professional. So feel free to make a wild guess. You don't have to share it. You don't have to mail back your tasting form. You can guess the roast level. And again, these kind of aspects, these columns going across the top are all aspects of the coffee. I'm going to define most of them or all of them once we really get into tasting. Cool. Any questions so far? Wonderful. So if your water boiled more than 5 minutes ago, go ahead and start it up again. It probably did, since we started, at the top of the hour. I'm going to start mine again. And then by the time we're done with the smelling the coffee grounds portion, or fragrance as it's called on the tasting form, then the water will be at a good temperature to start making the coffee. All right. So yes, as I said, that first column says fragrance and aroma. So we separate the 2 smells that coffee has from dry coffee grounds and wet once we hit it with water, because they can smell different, and they do smell different a lot of times. I'm sure you smelled coffee grounds before. I have a couple of tips for you to get a better sense. Tip number one is that we want to take short sniffs, several in a row, right? So pretend you're like a wild animal or a dog, a bunny, choose your favorite. You're going to take short sniffs, several in a row, like you're trying to figure something out, which we are. The second tip is, while you're doing that, with your nose deep in the cup, you're going to hit the cup against the palm of your other hand to shake up the coffee ground. So it would look like this. And that's it. So let's go through. We can do this kind of together. You've got your tasting form, you have something to write with, and we're going to evaluate the fragrance, which is our introduction to the coffee. So what I like to do is I'll take 3 passes. So the first time through, I'm just going to take a quick couple sniffs of each coffee, not even worry about writing anything down, just going through from yellow to purple. This is just going to build this basis of comparison for us. Get our nose and our brain thinking coffee. All right. Once you get to purple, you can head right back to yellow, go back to the beginning, and now we'll start our second pass. And this pass can be more slow. You can take your time, take as many sniffs as you'd like, and jot down whatever comes into your head, whatever you think it smells like. Yellow might already smell a little different to you now that you've smelled other coffees before it. And the words that you jot down, they don't have to be specific food words, right? I'll use words like, this one smells stronger, this one smells more mild, this one smells lighter. I can't remember the other thing I was going to say. It'll come to me. The third time that you sniff, and remember I said I want to take 3 passes, that third time, just smell them out of order. So whatever way feels good to you. You can go backwards from purple back to yellow, or whatever. Just smell them out of order. And what's going to happen is you're going to bring out some new information, because it does change it a little, what you're picking up on depending on what coffee you smelled right before it. So the last thing I'll say, I'm sure you're sniffing away, is that if it might not be the last thing I say, but one thing I want to say is, if your nose is getting overwhelmed, you want to reset. What we do is we'll smell our shirt or our arm, our hand, and that actually resets our nose, and you can go back to smelling coffee. It's basically smelling something neutral that's not coffee. You go back to smelling coffee. It actually really helps. It's kind of strange, but it does. If you do that and they're still all smelling the same, you can also just kind of choose 2 coffees and smell back and forth between them. Like yellow and purple are good too, yellow and green. Going back and forth, trying to figure out what any differences are. Awesome. So we'll give another minute to sniff through. And also feel free, if you'd like to share out loud or in the chat some of what you're smelling. Feel free, whether that's, again, a specific word or just, you like one better, you don't like one as much. Yeah. We'll just take another minute to do that. Are any of them smelling kind of heavier to you?
Yeah, I feel like the green one smells very interesting compared to the red or yellow one.
Yeah.
Big difference.
Yeah. I totally agree. It's like, man. It seems weird, but it reminds me of like a horse farm. I don't know why.
I agree.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah.
I was gonna say like like there's like that dank, like wet basement kind of a smell almost.
Yeah, kind of like a musky.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. But it's not unpleasant to me.
no.
It's kind of comforting. Yeah. Yeah, I also get like kind of pretzel, like a dark kind of pretzel thing going on. Oh, man. Yeah, super, super cool. So, okay. Um, this again, as I said, was our first introduction to the coffees. So if you didn't get much, no worries. As we hit it with water and we do the aroma, it's going to be a little easier to get some stuff. And then, of course, as we get into the tasting portion, that's the easiest part. So if you would, I'll grab your kettles and um, if you have a scale, you'll just one at a time put your mug on the scale and weigh it to 200 grams. So get your scale in the gram mode, put the cup on the scale, tear it out, weigh to 200 for each one. If you have a measuring pitcher, you want to take that water right off the boil, as I said before. Pour 7 ounces or 200 mils into your measuring pitcher, and then pour it into each cup. All right. Any questions before I start pouring anyway? Maybe y'all started already. Okay,
No
cool.
questions. No.
Okay, awesome. So I'll say ready, set, go, but maybe you started already and that's cool too. All right, ready, set, go. All right, and 3 big things you want to know. Well, I guess just 2. One is that if you move the stream around while you pour, it makes it easier to get all those coffee grounds wet and to not have any dry spots. So if you kind of move it around, that helps. And the second thing is that there's actually no stirring involved in any of this. So we're just going to pour the hot water over the coffee and let them sit without disturbing them. That can be pretty hard to do because it's tempting when you have a spoon or two spoons and you've got water and coffee. But throughout this whole process, there's actually no stirring. When you're done pouring the hot water in the coffee cups, go ahead and pour some hot water into one of your extra mugs, and that's just going to be rinse water for your spoons. And if you ran out of water, you have time to heat more. We'll also be needing another 6 to 8 ounces of water after this because we're going to refresh our rinse water after a while. So we'll need to dump this out and refill it. So you'll need a little bit more water. And again, you have time to heat up some more to do that. Awesome. So I'm looking at the time. We have a few minutes until the coffee is ready. And here's the deal. So this is the time where we can get our first sense of the aroma. It's not going to be the strongest, most intense aroma right now. So we'll call this like aroma light. But you can start by leaning over, taking those same short sniffs, several in a row, those bunny sniffs, those, hound dog sniffs. As you go through, you can, go from yellow to purple and then back the other way to try to get some contrast. When the coffee's done brewing, I'm going to demonstrate how we're going to disturb each one of these crusts of grounds that has risen to the top with a spoon. And when we do that, we'll have our nose over the cup, and that's when we'll get actually an even more intense aroma. So again, that's why I said this is kind of aroma light. But now and also in a couple minutes, feel free to jot down on your tasting form, what you're smelling. And maybe what you're smelling is different now than it was when the coffee was dry. And that's why, a coffee roaster would separate the smell of the coffee into these 2 categories because it can change when you hit it with hot water and starts to brew. Awesome. Cool. Yeah. You also might notice that um, the coffee grounds rose to the top. Um, and some of the coffee grounds look darker, some look lighter, like more reddish brown on one of my cups. And I'm actually gonna just only spotlight my top down camera right now. So I'll do that here. Oh, cool. Awesome. It looks like you sent it as, yeah, I was gonna say you sent it as a direct, but Cynthia said the first one is the lightest right now. Is that happening to anybody else? Um, anybody else seeing
Yeah,
the
I see that
first?
as well.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Yes, we
Um,
have that also.
Awesome. Yeah. So it's the lightest. And also, you can see on mine, I don't know if this happened to you, but the coffee grounds rose to the top and then almost immediately they fell. They started to settle back down. And there's a reason for that, which I will talk about after I show you this. So, and I'll demonstrate this for you, maybe starting on the blue one since my yellow one again already started to fall. So, here's what you'll do. First off, of course, you're going to have your nose over the cup so you can get that aroma. I've definitely dipped my nose in, so get as close as you feel comfortable. Put your spoon just barely under that crust till you see some liquid, and then you just push the back of your spoon away from you, coming around in a circle, kind of tracing the edge of the cup. You go around 2 or 3 times just to make sure that coffee crust on top gets broken up and you've sniffed. You can take a moment to jot down what you got, and then always remember to rinse your spoon before you move on and start dipping it in another cup. So again, I'll just repeat that for anybody who needs it. So your nose is over the cup, you're ready to sniff. You're gonna put your spoon just barely under the surface of that crust till you see some liquid, and then just trace the edge of the cup while you move your spoon away from you and back towards yourself, and do that circle a couple times and rinse your spoon in between. Cool. So give a couple minutes to do that and for you to get that aroma. Is anybody having an easier time with the aroma now? Is it a little stronger than it was before? Let me know. Oh, I saw. Yeah, it smells so good. Awesome. Is there one that's smelling better to you, uh, Cynthia, than others at this point? Feel free to withhold your judgment though.
The purple smells more of what I'm used to coffee smelling like.
Mm,
And I feel like the red is the most like interesting to me right now.
awesome. Awesome. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Also, that the purple would smell more similar. It's a heavier one, definitely. Um, the foam that's left over on top of these cups right now, it catches coffee grounds in it, and it actually tastes pretty bitter. So we're gonna get rid of this foam. That's the next step, to get rid of the foam so that we can taste the coffee underneath. Um, the purple felt thick when you stirred it. Yeah, Cynthia said. Yeah, yeah. So that's also another kind of a neat thing about this is, well, here's my gas talk. So, so when we roast coffee, gas builds up inside each coffee bean. It's mostly carbon dioxide. And so the longer you roast a coffee, the more gas has a chance to build up, right? And when we hit these coffee grounds with hot water, a bunch of that CO2 just left the coffee grounds, and it actually pushed the coffee grounds, it helped push the coffee grounds to the top and form that crust. So when we broke the crust, that gas left, and because that gas was gone, that's how the coffee grounds were able to settle to the bottom. But in any case, right, as I was saying, like the darker a roast, the more gas it has. So the more probably had a thicker crust on top. Like you were saying, Cynthia, was thicker when you stirred it. It had more gas to push more coffee grounds to the top. And now that evidence is still there if we look at this foam. And this foam is made up of tiny little bubbles of carbon dioxide. Probably it's going to be thicker on the cups that were harder to break through, right? So the purple, it's the green is also thicker for me. Yeah, I don't know about anybody else. But yeah, but it is the most bitter part of the beverage. So right now I'll show you how we're going to get rid of it. I'll demonstrate on this middle one here. Might be a little easier to see. So what you want to do is, and you'll need everything for this. You want your rinse mug, your empty mug, and both of your spoons. Put one spoon on top of the other, just like that, 1/1, and dip it just under the foam on the other side of the cup from yourself. And then you're just going to scrape the spoons along the edge as you move them towards you. So they're coming around here, moving away from each other, and then back together. They go again, they cover one over the other, and then you kind of scoop out, and there you go. You got some foam there, probably some coffee too. You can throw that in your empty mug. We'll call that the foam mug. Rinse off in your rinse mug, even if you're going to go back to the same cup. You can see if you have any like little islands, like here, you can just actually put the back of your spoon on top of the foam, and that will actually cling to it and get rid of it. Cool. So you'll probably need to go back another time or so, especially for some of the cups that have more foam on them. And feel free, if anybody would like to, in the name of science, take a sip of the foam and let us know what you think, if you're curious. I'll usually do it like once a month just to remind myself that I don't want to do it. Yeah. Does anybody usually make, are y'all more into like drip coffee, like pour over or electric drip, or are you more into like French press or espresso? Any preferences out there?
I normally do a pour over in the morning,
Awesome.
but no preferences. I think kind of just trying new things is also something I'd like to do too.
Oh, very cool. Awesome. Cool. And then Cynthia said, I like French press. Awesome. Yeah, so the paper filter of a pour over or electric drip, it'll filter out a lot more oils. I'm gonna just replace this spotlight here. It'll filter out a lot more coffee oils and sediment too than a French press will. So it'll end up just feeling kind of lighter, and also that oil can kind of get in the way of parsing out separate flavors. So it is something we call clarity, like something with a paper filter give more clarity to the flavors. But on the other side of it, like a French press, which lets more oil in, a little bit of sediment, you get this really rich kind of full round body, right? Which, what the heck is body? Good segue. While this coffee needs to cool another minute, I'm gonna go over the rest of the tasting form, and then we'll be ready to taste. Okay, so we did fragrance and aroma, nailed it. The next one is flavor, and flavor is just what the coffee, basically what the coffee tastes like. It's flavor, right? I mean, what am I trying to say? So basically, jot down the first thing that comes into your head, as always, right? Use the flavor wheel if you need some reminders. We're gonna sip the coffee in a way that engages more taste buds and also gets our nose involved, because our nose does most of the work when you're tasting stuff, and I'll explain that in a sec. Body is how the coffee feels when it's in your mouth and also right after you swallow it. So a good way to figure it out while it's in your mouth is to swish it around. If it feels more light, tea-like, watery, like skim milk, it's a light body. If it feels more like whole milk, it's a heavy body. It can also feel somewhere in between, like 2% milk, kind of creamy. So feel free to mark down how light or heavy the body is on each coffee as compared to the other four. And as you go, you might find you're moving that line around as you start to taste other coffees. And that makes sense, right? You thought one was the heaviest, and so you tasted this other one, etc. Body, then acidity. So acidity is a fun category. This is not the kind of acidity that like would hurt your stomach. This acidity is related to flavor, and it's actually related to fruit. It's the fruit-like quality of the coffee. So what does that mean to us? If you take a sip of one of these coffees and it really makes your mouth water. If it's tart or sour, reminds you of taking a sip of orange juice. That coffee has a very high acidity. You take a sip of another coffee, it's much milder, neutral, like taking a sip of milk. Your mouth is not watering. That coffee is a very low acidity, and coffees can fall anywhere in between. This is a fun category to choose 2 coffees and sip back and forth to try to figure out which one's making your mouth water more, which one's making your mouth water less. Pro tip: the darker a coffee is roasted, the lower the acidity will be. So a medium roast would have less acidity than a light roast. A dark roast would have the lowest acidity of any of them. So if you're tasting some flavors that you relate to dark roast, smoky, bitter, probably your mouth isn't watering much, right? Then aftertaste. Aftertaste is just, what are you tasting after? After you swallow the coffee, what's left? Let's say you wrote down for one of these coffees under flavor, chocolate, nuts, right? After you swallow it, you're still tasting the chocolate, but not the nuts. So the aftertaste is chocolate. And in terms of how short or long it lasts, you can count in seconds how long you're still tasting it before you're kind of not tasting it anymore. So, feel free to use this tasting form as much or as little as what makes sense to you, figuring out your preferences. You don't have to go in order. You can start with acidity, go back to flavor, anything you'd like. And now's the time where I just will assume, actually, I forgot to do one thing. Now's the time to refresh your rinse water. So if you are near a sink and you want to get up, you can dump out your rinse water in a sink. I just dumped mine out into my foam mug, and then I'm going to refresh with some fresh hot water. So now you only need 1 rinse mug and 1 spoon. So I was just going to say that now's the time in the tasting where I will just assume that none of y'all have ever slurped before, and I'll show you how we slurp coffee for this kind of coffee tasting. Just testing for temperature. When the first time you sip, just pretend it's like, soup. You're not sure it's too hot or not, so you don't burn your tongue, just in case your water is hotter than mine. In any case, here we go. Start out, if you're not an everyday slurper, start out with less coffee in your spoon. You're less likely to choke on it and cough. Although if you do that, you're doing it right. Hold the spoon up sideways to your mouth, and then you'll tip the spoon towards your mouth and suck in real quick. It should sound like this. Just like that. It's a slurp. Hold the coffee on your tongue for a few seconds, or you could swish it around if you're thinking about body before you swallow it. And remember to rinse your spoon before you move on to the next coffee. So we'll give some time for us to taste kind of coffee on our own, and then we can come back together and share what we've tasted. A couple things. One is that if you'd like some structure for tasting, I will do 3 passes, just like we did fragrance. The first pass is a quick sip of each, just to get the coffee in, kind of coating my mouth, get my brain thinking coffee, get my taste buds involved. Just remember to rinse your spoon in between as you go down the line. Just like that, all the way down to purple. The second pass is when I'll slow down, take more time, start filling out the form if you want to. The third time is when you go out of order, just like before. And you can be going out of order at any time, right? So I'm gonna kick this up a notch in terms of our coffee tasting music, and we'll really get partying now. Here we go. And yeah, let me know if you have any questions as we go. But again, I'm gonna give us a few minutes to taste coffee, and then we'll be back together talking about it. And let me know again, as I just said, if you have any questions. Cool. As I said, it's fun for like acidity and body to choose two coffees and go back and forth between them. And you might find like if for example, if you take a slurp of blue after yellow, the acidity might feel one way, but then if you take a slurp of blue after purple, you might pick up on some other things. Um, yeah, that's about as close to no spoilers as I can get. Cool. By the way, if you're having um, any of the aftertastes are kind of lasting too long for you, you can take a sip of water, to kind of clear out your palate. And because your nose is getting involved, also you can also do that same nose trick. And I forgot to say, there's a reason why we slurp, not just because we sound cool, um, but it does two things. One thing is we're spraying the coffee all over our mouth to the back of our throat where we also have taste buds. So we're trying to make contact with more taste buds. And the other thing that slurping does is, that quick intake of breath mixes the coffee with oxygen and turns some of it into a gas and gets it up into our noses retronasally. So that's just helping our noses out so that we can, overall get a better sense of the flavor. Cool. And the coffees, as I said before, right, they're from all over the world, different roast levels, and we want to make them different enough when we created these flavor profiles, right, and also when we pick coffees every month, make them different enough so that there's at least one that'll be to everyone's preference. But that means that we expect you to have one or more that you aren't as into. I usually designate that on my tasting form with like a smiley face or a frowny face, right? Not as into it. If I can kind of figure out why, maybe I'll note that. But that is all to say that, as we get into the next step, which is sharing a little bit about what we tasted, what we liked, what we didn't like, sometimes it's easier to talk about the ones that we don't like first, so don't feel weird or bad about it. You can definitely, take any of these coffees to task if they're not your preference. But yeah, so we'll give like just about maybe another 30 seconds to a minute, and then we can share. And after we share a little bit, we'll go right into the big reveal. Cool. Okay. So awesome. Do y'all at this point have any preferences? Any ones that you like a little better than the others? Any-
Surprisingly, I like the purple better.
The purple. Awesome. What do you like about it?
It just seems a little more creamy, definitely less bitter.
Awesome.
There's something about the aroma that reminds me of a Guinness stout.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I absolutely think that this profile is like the Guinness of of the coffee profiles for sure. Yeah, yeah.
I like the blue. I really liked the body of the blue. After the yellow and then I tasted the blue, it made me feel like the blue, if I would have tasted the blue first, it may have been like different, but the yellow was so light. I think that
Mhm.
made me like the blue a little bit more. I also
Mm,
really like the purple as well. I'm not usually a dark roast gal,
mm,
but I agree with Gwendolyn. It feels like more mild. It's still a little smoky and dark roasty, but it's not like too bitter or too
yeah.
acidic like you had mentioned before. I like it.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah, both of those coffees I feel like are the milder ones on the table too. For maybe some different reasons, but they both are kind of chocolatey, kind of mildly sweet. Yeah. Yeah. Um, oh cool. Cynthia says you like red too. Um, yeah, the were any of them making any of y'all's like mouths water, like we talked about acidity? Any of them like feeling like more fruit like?
I feel like the yellow one, at least for me, made a little bit more watery, acidic.
Yeah, yeah. Does that tend to be like something you look for, Mark, or something you try to avoid?
I don't know. I think it like the yellow is, yeah, it's very interesting. It's very light, and I kind of enjoy it, but yeah, I don't know. Is kind of the answer.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah. I definitely I rated that one as like the shortest kind of aftertaste, but the highest acidity. Yeah. But maybe red actually has a shorter aftertaste. I think I'm leaning towards red as we talk about it. It has some of what yellow has, but to kind of a lesser degree. Yeah. It like finishes like a little more even, a little softer. Yeah. Well, cool. So, continue to slurp if you'd like and caffeinate. Oh, sorry, I just saw oh, cool. Awesome. I saw that Gwendolyn said definitely the yellow. Yeah, it should be too. Cool. So y'all, yeah, y'all have identified the experience of acidity and identified the experience of higher acidity, which is a good thing to know about yourself, especially also to get when you go out and try to pick out coffee, which is some of what this big reveal is about. So I'm going to go ahead and share the slides with you. There's a slide for each coffee, and you also have those envelopes. You can, at this time, feel free to grab your envelope. You open it from the back. The first postcard facing you should be yellow. It should be yellow. Um, if they're in the right order, sometimes they move around. But cool. So this first coffee, this yellow coffee, is a really interesting coffee. Because as you pull out the postcards, you're seeing where it's from, right? It's from Nicaragua, from the Dipilto region, and from one farm called Finca La Bendición. But I'll tell you, this coffee to me, if I didn't know where it was from, I would think it was an African coffee. It tastes a lot like coffee from Ethiopia, coffee from Kenya. This one farmer, Luis Alberto Baladres, he does a lot of really interesting kind of forward thinking processing of coffee. So basically, coffee processing is, two seeds, what we call beans, grow inside one piece of coffee fruit. It's like round, you can see it there. 95% of the time, there's two. Sometimes there's one, but usually there's two. That's why one side is flat on a coffee bean, because it's pressed up against the other one inside that round piece of fruit. And so processing just refers to, how they get the seeds out from the fruit and prepare it to be dried and sent to roasters, right? So the most traditional way is the sun-dried or natural process. And that's what you see in this photo, where the seed is actually dried inside the fruit for like 4 to 6 weeks. It's super neat, and it imparts a really, really fruity flavor. And the more carefully it's dried, the more acidity you'll have, and the less kind of funky it'll taste. The less carefully it's dried, you tend to get kind of some of that kind of funky, almost like tasting like over fermented fruit, because the fruit, if it isn't dried evenly, will start to kind of rot against itself. So, but the better ones don't have that flavor. Our tasting notes, we got peach and pineapple and red grape. In terms of tasting notes, like if you didn't get these 3 things, there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with your taste buds. These are the kind of biggest things that we were tasting. We also tasted a lot of other stuff, and I tasted a lot of other stuff today even, right? I got other fruits. I also got like some nuttiness to it, like maybe cashews, like raspberry. But in any case, when roasters are putting notes on a bag for you, they're not necessarily assuming that you're going to taste those things, but they are trying to give you clues as to 2 things in particular. One is the acidity. What's the acidity going to be like? And also what's the sweetness or like base note heaviness going to be like, if there is any, right? So pardon me. So with these tasting notes, for example, right, I always say if you see any fruit in the tasting notes, then you know that that coffee has some acidity, right? If you see citrus, or in this case pineapple, it's going to have a lot of acidity, right? And so all 3 of these tasting notes being fruit is also telling us something about the quality of sweetness that this coffee might have. Natural processed coffee is usually a little sweeter than if it had not been processed naturally, because it has more contact with that fruit as it dries, it gets more sugar, right? But there's not necessarily, like, let's say it said peach, pineapple, and milk chocolate, or peach, pineapple, and caramel, right? That's a whole kind of different sweetness, kind of a heavier sweetness, something more coating. This sweetness I do feel like is lighter, more in terms of like the sweetness you might get from a red grape, which is still pretty acidic, or a peach, let alone pineapple. So, as we go through the rest of the tasting notes, it'll become clearer too when we start to talk about heavier sweetness and base notes and stuff like that. But this is, if you look on our website from month to month, we always have a fruity profile. It's always the lightest roast, because remember what I said about acidity. Acidity gets lower as you roast darker, and you also cover up fruity flavors, and like any floral kind of aromas, stuff like that gets just totally subsumed by roasting it darker. So we have to keep this at a light roast in order to capitalize on that fruit. In terms of where, at Driftaway, right, the fruity profile is always going to taste very similar to this. We usually choose coffees from East Africa for this profile because they are generally very fruity coffees, especially for the main reason that they grow pretty high relative to how high coffee grows. The higher grown a coffee is, the more acidity it will have, as long as everything else goes correctly in terms of quality. And also the kind of processing techniques in East Africa tend to yield fruitier coffees. Wonderful. All right, so moving on to the second one, we're talking about this blue coffee. I know Sarinthia liked this one. This is a milder one. This is a coffee from Peru, from the San Ignacio region, and the name of the coffee is Rio Amoju, and it's from a cooperative of coffee farmers. And you can see right on the front that roasted almond, brown sugar, and milk chocolate. So, talking about acidity, right? Maybe you got some kind of trace of acidity from this coffee, especially if you sip it after like green or after purple. It's a little more evident, but there's not enough to have it be in a tasting note. And that's the main thing. So looking at these tasting notes, you would say, okay, this coffee doesn't have much acidity, and it's got some heavier sweetness, some coating milk chocolates and brown sugar, right? I also tasted like walnuts and toast and dark chocolate. It's milk chocolate there. Yeah, so a little more bitter, black pepper, a little bit earthy. Yeah. So, again, just proving the point, there's a lot of things that these coffees taste like beyond these three things, but it is giving you a sense of what the acidity and what the sweetness is going to be like. We call it our classic profile because we want it to just taste like a regular cup of Joe. Take it to a medium roast again to kind of mute that acidity and give more of those kind of more kind of chocolatey, kind of toasty flavors. Awesome. Next one in line. This is one of my this is, I think, just a Driftaway favorite. We've had it, I think, for, gosh, I should look at the postcard and not try to remember, but I believe it's the third or fourth year that we've had it. Yep, past 3 years. So this is from the Wheeler region of Colombia, the La Victoria Cooperative. Pardon the misspelling there. So this is a really neat coffee because every year that we get it, it gets higher in acidity and gets fruitier. And it's just really neat to see kind of the progression of this coffee. So maybe you got a little bit of mouth-watering acidity in there, similar to how an orange would make your mouth water. Maybe you got something a little more muted, like the sweetness of honeydew, or a little heavier, like the caramel. This is our balance profile. We want it to have some of that fruit acidity, but also have something to balance it out, right? Like some kind of heavier sweetness. And it's going to taste very similar to coffees from this area of the world. And of course, taken a little bit darker than yellow starts to help to balance it out a little bit, have a little less of that bright acidity. All right, this one, this green coffee, which we talked about the fragrance of it, but we didn't so much talk about the flavor. But yeah, throw into the chat if you want to share some of what you tasted in this coffee, or if you think that the tasting notes that you're reading line up or not. But this is a really neat coffee from Papua New Guinea. If you've never had coffee from Papua New Guinea before, it's such a neat area, a really great tasting coffee. It tends to have some really nice kind of chocolatey kind of sweetness, but also some nice acidity to balance it out. However, at this roast level, we are covering up a lot of that acidity, right? And where I think that it comes out, and where we thought it comes out, is kind of a little bit in the aroma. So, if you picked up on that, that's cool. If not, that's also cool. I actually didn't, I'm looking at my notes. I didn't really get it this time, but that bergamot is there. Bergamot is that citrus fruit. I don't think it's really eaten a lot, though you can eat it. It's a little bit bitter, but the citrus, the rind, the oil from the rind is used in Earl Grey tea, and it gives Earl Grey tea that kind of aromatic, kind of citric experience. And so that's kind of what we're going for in describing it that way. But in any case, you're also getting dark chocolate, some heavy sweetness. And it's hard to say that this coffee would taste like coffees from, this area of the world or what have you, because again, at this darker roast, you're starting to cover up origin flavors and nuance in favor of these heavier flavors. So it's really just going to taste like similarly roasted coffees, especially as you get to this purple coffee, right? This purple coffee is our darkest roast. It's from Mexico, from the Oaxaca region, and kind of around the municipality of San Andres Cabecera Nueva. It's from a few different smallholder farmers. I think there's about 30 smallholder, just meaning they each have around 10 acres of land that they grow on. And they also, each farmer separately, grew, harvested their coffee, and also processed it. So this photo is representative of one farm where they're drying out on a patio, and the coffee is spread out on a tarp. The only coffee that was processed naturally or sun-dried was that first yellow coffee. Every other coffee that you drank was the washed process. And generally, that's when they strip the fruit off of the seed right away after it's harvested, clean the seed off of that kind of residual sugar and fruit, and then let it dry. So it usually looks beige when it's drying, rather than that red purple that you saw on that first coffee. So yep, the tasting notes, right? Smoked spices, nutty brown sugar. And actually, looking back at the tasting at the postcard, the smallholder actually is way smaller than I thought, only about 2.5 to 5 acres, so much smaller farm areas. you know, we call this extra bold because it's darker than bold. And one interesting kind of note about dark roast coffee, if you're into dark roast coffee, it tends to be a little more complex and just taste a little sweeter if it's grown at higher altitudes, like above 4,000 feet or like 1,400 meters. And because the coffee beans will be more dense the higher they grow. So they'll hold up to the length of time and the higher heat in the roaster better. So yeah. Sorry to rush a little at the end. I don't want to keep you past the top of the hour. But you know, I'm pretty sure, I'm actually not sure, but if this Explorer box was the first shipment of a subscription, then you want to take that next step on top and go to driftaway.coffee/explorer box. You can use the QR code and basically tell us which ones were your preference, and which ones to ship you every month, one or more. If you're not ready yet and you want to brew some, like make a pour over or however you like to make coffee, you don't have to do it right now. Of course, you can wait and make them a different way. If you got the Explorer box as a one-off, and as not part of a subscription, you have a code there that you can use to get 30% off your first delivery of a paper shipment subscription. So you can also use that QR code there. Wonderful. Okay, so on that note, are there, if you don't have any, let me just check to make sure, do y'all have any questions before we say goodbye? Looking at,
No questions. Just want to say thank you. This was
oh,
very informative.
awesome. You're so welcome. And yeah, thanks to Cerinthia and Gwendolyn as well. I hope you're sufficiently caffeinated and you're ready to party on this Friday. And yeah, happy holidays to all three of you. Take care.
Thank you so much, James. This was great.
Awesome. You're so welcome.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Thank you, James.
All right.
You were fantastic.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. Awesome. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.